The year was 2387, and humanity had quietly spread across the galaxy like seeds carried by a gentle breeze. On Terra Station, Admiral Jihu Kim watched through the massive viewing windows as ships from dozens of different alien species moved peacefully between the orbital platforms. Human cargo vessels carried goods to trade, while sleek diplomatic shuttles transported ambassadors to peace meetings. Everything looked calm and normal. Far across the galaxy, the Zephyrian leaders gathered in their war chambers. These insect-like aliens had sharp claws, hard shells, and minds focused on conquest. They had been watching humanity expand for years, and they did not like what they saw. To them, humans seemed weak and soft. The Zephyrians believed humans cared only about making money through trade and solving problems with boring meetings. "Look at their so-called military," clicked General Vorthak, his mandibles scraping together as he studied the holographic displays. A few old patrol boats and some defense platforms that look like they were built 100 years ago. These humans are merchants pretending to be warriors. The other Zephyrian commanders nodded their agreement. They had spent months studying human colonies, watching their trade routes, counting their visible military assets. Everything pointed to the same conclusion: humanity would be an easy target. What the Zephyrians could not see were the hidden chambers deep beneath the surface of Luna, Earth's moon. There, in rooms that appeared on no official maps, Admiral Sora Park sat before banks of quantum-encrypted monitors. Her dark eyes reflected the glow of dozens of screens showing peaceful human colonies across the galaxy. She had been watching and waiting for years, hoping this day would never come. The emergency alert came at 0347 local time. Commander Minho Lee, stationed at the colony of New Eden, received the transmission that would change everything. His communication officer, a young woman named Lieutenant Hannah Song, turned pale as she read the incoming data. "Sir, we have multiple hostile contacts dropping out of hyperspace at the system's edge," she reported, her voice steady despite her fear. "Unknown ship configurations. They are opening fire on the agricultural platforms." Through his command center's windows, Commander Lee could see the bright flashes in space as the Zephyrian weapons struck their targets. The agricultural platforms that fed millions of people were defenseless civilian installations. They had no shields, no weapons, no way to fight back. Within minutes, they were nothing but expanding clouds of debris and frozen air. The attack was quick and brutal. The Zephyrians had planned well. They struck 3 human colonies at the same time: New Eden, Harvest Moon, and Terra Verde. Their ships appeared without warning, bombarded the settlements from orbit, and destroyed everything they could find. 50,000 human civilians died in just 6 hours. 2 entire colonies were turned into lifeless, radioactive wastelands. Admiral Park watched it all happen through her hidden monitoring systems. Each destroyed building, each burning city, each life lost was recorded by sensors the Zephyrians did not know existed. When the attacks finally ended, she sat in silence for a long moment, processing what she had witnessed. Then she reached for a device that had not been touched in over 100 years. It was a simple red button, unmarked and unremarkable, but it was connected to the most powerful military network in galactic history. Admiral Park's finger hovered over it for just a moment before she pressed down. Across human space, hidden receivers began to pulse with urgent signals. On Luna, beneath mining facilities that looked ordinary from the outside, massive doors slowly opened for the first time in decades. On Mars, what appeared to be research stations suddenly revealed their true nature as weapons factories. On a dozen other worlds, humans who lived quiet lives as farmers or shopkeepers received coded messages and began preparing for their real jobs. In the deepest levels of Terra Station, Admiral Kim felt his personal communicator vibrate against his chest. He looked down at the simple message displayed on its screen: "Dragons awaken." 3 words that meant humanity was no longer going to hide what it truly was. The secret that the Zephyrians and every other species in the galaxy did not understand was simple: humanity had never been weak. They had never been helpless merchants who relied on others for protection. They were apex predators who had chosen to appear peaceful. For 3 centuries, they had maintained this careful disguise, building trade relationships and diplomatic ties while keeping their true military might hidden beneath layers of misdirection and carefully planned deception. The Dragon Protocol was not just a military strategy. It was a way of life that every human understood from birth. Be peaceful when possible, but be ready to become something terrible when necessary. Show the galaxy a face of merchants and diplomats, but keep the weapons of dragons hidden until the moment when hiding was no longer an option. As Admiral Park's emergency beacon sent its signal across human space, sleeping dragons began to stir. In hidden shipyards, Crews ran to vessels that had been disguised as cargo haulers but were actually the most advanced warships ever built. In secret training facilities, soldiers who had spent years pretending to be civilians began putting on armor that incorporated technology most aliens thought was impossible. The Zephyrians had made a fatal error in judgment. They had attacked human civilians without provocation, believing they were striking at a weak and defenseless species. Instead, they had just awakened something that had been deliberately keeping itself hidden. The dragons were no longer sleeping, and the galaxy was about to learn what humanity really was when it stopped pretending to be something else. The war had begun, but it would not be the easy victory the Zephyrians had expected. The emergency meeting happened faster than anyone thought possible. Within 3 hours of the attacks on the human colonies, representatives from every human world gathered in the Terran Defense Council chambers through holographic projectors. The room buzzed with quiet tension as leaders who had spent their careers managing trade disputes and diplomatic negotiations now faced the most serious decision in human history. Council President Nari Choi stood at the center of the circular chamber, her face calm but her eyes showing the weight of what was about to happen. She had hoped this day would never come, but the reports from the destroyed colonies left no choice. 50,000 civilians were dead, and the Zephyrians showed no signs of stopping their attacks. "We all know why we are here," President Choi said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "The Dragon Protocol has remained dormant for over a century. The question before us now is simple: do we activate it?" She paused, looking around the room at faces she had worked with for years. "All those in favor?" Every hand in the chamber rose without hesitation. Physical representatives raised their hands, while holographic delegates from distant worlds activated their voting systems. The decision was unanimous, just as it had been during the Centauri Wars so long ago. "Dragon Protocol is hereby activated," President Choi announced. "May the galaxy forgive us for what we are about to become." The moment those words were spoken, signals raced across human space at faster than light speeds. On dozens of worlds, in hidden facilities that appeared on no public maps, ancient systems came back to life. Warning lights that had not blinked for decades suddenly began flashing red. Computers that had been running in sleep mode for generations awakened with a hum of increasing power. On Luna, the moon that orbited Earth, something extraordinary began to happen. What looked like ordinary mining complexes on the surface suddenly revealed their true nature. Massive sections of rock and metal slid apart with the grinding sound of enormous machinery. Beneath the disguised surface, hangar bays larger than city blocks opened to the vacuum of space. Inside these hidden chambers, ships that had been sleeping for decades began to stir. Captain Hannah Song felt the deck plates beneath her feet vibrate as her destroyer came to life around her. To the rest of the galaxy, the Lightning's Edge appeared to be a converted merchant vessel, maybe 40 years old and suitable only for carrying cargo between nearby star systems. The truth was very different. The Lightning's Edge was a predator designed by the best military engineers in human history. Its hull was made from adaptive armor that could reshape itself to deflect energy weapons. Its engines used quantum drives that made the ship nearly impossible to track or target. Its weapons could punch through the shields of any known alien warship with a single shot. Captain Song ran her hands over the control panels as systems that had been dormant for years came online one by one. "All stations report ready," called her weapons officer, Lieutenant Doha Park. "Fusion core is at full power. Quantum drives are charged and ready for jump." "Good," Captain Song replied, feeling the familiar weight of command settle on her shoulders. "Signal the fleet. We go to war." Similar scenes played out across human space. Admiral Ji-Hoo Kim, who most aliens thought commanded a small patrol fleet of maybe 20 ships, watched through the windows of his command center as the first Dragon fleet assembled. 200 warships, each one more advanced than anything the galaxy had seen before, moved into formation around his flagship. These were not the patrol boats and converted freighters that aliens expected from humanity. These were weapons of war built by a species that understood violence better than most of the galaxy realized. The ships carried quantum torpedoes that could punch through moon-sized asteroids. Their armor could withstand direct hits from antimatter weapons. Their sensors could track enemy fleets from 3 star systems away. On Mars, Admiral Sora Park watched her own fleet prepare for battle. The second Dragon fleet consisted of ships designed for a different kind of warfare, stealth attacks and quick strikes against enemy supply lines. Her vessels could appear from nowhere, destroy their targets, and vanish before the enemy knew what had hit them. But before the shooting started, humanity tried one last time to solve the problem without total war. The message went out on all frequencies, broadcast to every Zephyrian ship and outpost in the galaxy. President Choi herself delivered the ultimatum: her voice carrying the weight of 3 centuries of human restraint finally coming to an end. "People of the Zephyrian hegemony," she began, "you have attacked human civilians without warning or provocation. You have murdered 50,000 innocent people who had done nothing to threaten you. This aggression cannot stand." She paused, letting the words sink in. "You have precisely 72 hours to withdraw all military forces from human space and surrender those responsible for these attacks. If you do this, we will return to our peaceful ways and seek justice through proper legal channels." The message continued with words that would echo through galactic history. "If you do not comply, you will discover that we are not the weak merchants you believe us to be. We have been peaceful by choice, not because we lack the power to be otherwise. After 72 hours, we are no longer traders and diplomats. We become dragons, and dragons do not show mercy to those who threaten their young." In the Zephyrian command centers, the military leaders listened to the human ultimatum and laughed. General Vorthak clicked his mandibles in amusement as he shared the message with his staff. "Did you hear that?" he buzzed. "The humans think they can frighten us with threats. Dragons? What foolishness." The laughter would not last long. The 72 hours passed like a countdown to doom. In Zephyrian command centers across the galaxy, military leaders continued their plans as if nothing had changed. They laughed about the human ultimatum and made jokes about merchants trying to play soldier. General Vorthak had ordered more attacks on human settlements, confident that the weak traders would eventually surrender and pay tribute like so many other species had done before. At exactly 72 hours and 1 minute after the ultimatum expired, the Zephyrians learned how wrong they had been. Commander Minho Lee sat in the captain's chair of his destroyer, watching the tactical display show 30 Zephyrian warships moving through the Kepler system. The enemy fleet was spread out in a loose formation, clearly not expecting any serious resistance. They had come to attack the shipping lanes that carried goods between human colonies, planning to destroy merchant vessels and steal whatever cargo they could find. "All systems ready, sir," reported his tactical officer. "Quantum drive charged for combat jump." "Take us in," Commander Lee ordered. "Right into the middle of them." Space around the human destroyer seemed to fold in on itself as the quantum drive activated. Reality twisted for just a moment, and then the ship materialized directly in the center of the Zephyrian formation. The enemy vessels were so close that their crews could see each other through the viewports. The Zephyrians had perhaps 3 seconds to realize what had happened before the human ship opened fire. Commander Lee's destroyer was not the converted merchant vessel it appeared to be. Its weapons were gravitic cannons that could tear apart molecular bonds and turn solid matter into expanding gas. Its targeting system could track and engage multiple targets simultaneously with perfect accuracy. The first volley destroyed 12 Zephyrian ships instantly. The second volley, fired just 2 seconds later, eliminated another 10. The remaining enemy vessels tried to return fire, but their weapons simply bounced off the human ship's adaptive armor. The third volley finished the job, turning the last 8 ships into clouds of glowing plasma. The entire battle lasted exactly 17 minutes. When it was over, 31 Zephyrian warships had been completely destroyed. Commander Lee's ship had not even received a scratch on its paint. 3 star systems away, Zephyrian Fleet Commander Trixis watched the recorded data from the battle with disbelief. He played the footage over and over, trying to understand what he had seen. A single human ship had appeared from nowhere and destroyed an entire battle group without taking any damage at all. "This is impossible," he whispered to his staff officers. "1 ship against 30. How could they do this? What kind of weapons are these humans using?" But the Battle of Kepler Station was just the beginning. Across the galaxy, human forces began what they called the hunt. This was not warfare as most species understood it. The humans did not try to hold territory or protect fixed positions. Instead, they tracked down Zephyrian fleets wherever they could be found and destroyed them completely. Admiral Sora Park had spent decades building intelligence networks throughout the galaxy. While other species saw humans as harmless traders, they had actually been gathering information about every military force in known space. They knew where the Zephyrian ships refueled, where they kept their supply depots, and how they moved their fleets from system to system. Captain Hannah Song commanded a squadron of 5 destroyers that specialized in what the humans called ghost strikes. Her ships would use their quantum drives to appear without warning next to enemy fleets, unleash massive firepower from their gravitic cannons, and then vanish back into quantum space before the enemy could react. The tactic was devastatingly effective. A Zephyrian supply convoy would be moving peacefully through space when Captain Song's ships would suddenly materialize around them. The human weapons would fire for perhaps 30 seconds, turning cargo ships and their escorts into debris. Then the human ships would disappear, leaving nothing behind but wreckage and confused survivors. Contact lost with Battle Group 7, reported a Zephyrian communications officer. Last transmission indicated they were under attack by unknown human vessels. That's the fourth fleet we've lost this week, General Vorthak replied, his mandibles clicking with frustration. How are they finding our ships? How are they moving so fast? The answer was simple. The humans had technology that most of the galaxy thought was impossible. Their quantum drives allowed ships to move faster than anything the Zephyrians possessed. Their weapons were more powerful than anything in the known galaxy. Their armor could withstand attacks that would destroy normal warships. Across the galaxy, other species watched the war with growing amazement and fear. The Galactic News Network struggled to report what was happening because it seemed too incredible to believe. Humans, who had been known for centuries as peaceful merchants and diplomats, were systematically destroying one of the most powerful military forces in the galaxy. The Altarian ambassador to the Galactic Council sent an urgent message to his government. The humans have revealed their true nature. They are not the weak traders we thought them to be. They are apex predators who have been hiding their strength. We must reconsider all our assumptions about this species. On the Zephyrian homeworld, panic began to spread through the military command. Fleet after fleet was being destroyed by human forces that appeared from nowhere and vanished just as quickly. The humans seemed to know exactly where every Zephyrian ship was located and could strike at will. Sir, reported a young intelligence officer to General Vorthak, we have lost contact with 17 separate battle groups in the past 10 days. The humans are not fighting like any military force we have ever encountered. They are hunting us. The general stared at the tactical displays showing the locations of destroyed fleets. Each red marker represented dozens of ships and thousands of lives lost. The pattern was clear. The humans were not trying to conquer territory or capture resources. They were simply eliminating every Zephyrian military asset they could find. For the first time since the war began, General Vorthak felt something he had never experienced before: fear. The final battle was about to begin at Zephyr Prime, the heavily defended homeworld of the Zephyrian hegemony. Admiral Jihu Kim stood on the bridge of his flagship, staring at the massive tactical display that showed the enemy's last stand. The planet was surrounded by the largest defensive fleet ever assembled in galactic history. 3,000 Zephyrian warships floated in carefully planned formations around their homeworld. Massive battle cruisers the size of cities formed the outer ring of defense. Medium destroyers and fast attack craft filled the spaces between the larger ships. Orbital weapon platforms, each one capable of destroying entire fleets, hung in space like deadly metal moons. Look at all those ships, said Captain Hannah Song, who had been promoted to serve as Admiral Kim's tactical advisor. They have pulled every vessel from across their empire to defend this one planet. They must think that numbers alone will save them. Admiral Kim nodded slowly as he studied the defensive formation. The Zephyrians had arranged their fleet in overlapping circles around their planet, with weapons platforms positioned to create killing fields that no enemy fleet should be able to survive. It was a strong defensive plan, the kind that had protected their homeworld for centuries. 3,000 ships, Admiral Kim said quietly. Against our 400. By the old rules of warfare, we should have no chance of victory. From the quantum communicator on his command chair, Admiral Sora Park's voice crackled through space from her position with the Second Dragon Fleet. But these are not the old rules, are they, Jihu? The Zephyrians still think this is about who has more ships and bigger guns. They still don't understand what they are facing, agreed Commander Minho Lee, whose destroyer squadron was approaching from the far side of the system. After everything we have shown them, they still believe this is a war that can be won with numbers. The truth was that the humans had not brought their full military power to Zephyr Prime to fight a traditional space battle. They had come to demonstrate something that would end the war forever. Hidden among their fleet were weapons that the galaxy had never seen before, technology that could turn the laws of physics themselves into instruments of war. As the human fleets moved into position around the Zephyrian homeworld, Admiral Kim gave the order that would change everything. Activate the gravity platforms. Deep in the cargo holds of several human ships, devices that looked like simple metal cylinders began to power up. These were humanity's most closely guarded secret, orbital platforms that could manipulate gravity itself. The technology was so advanced that most species would not believe it was possible, even if they saw it working. The platforms deployed from the human ships and took positions around Zephyr Prime. To the Zephyrians, they looked like harmless pieces of equipment, maybe sensor buoys or communication relays. The enemy fleet ignored them completely, focusing instead on the human warships that were moving into attack formation. Then Admiral Kim activated the weapons, and the Zephyrians learned what true power looked like. The gravity platforms began to twist and bend the space around Zephyr Prime. The planet's own gravity well, which had always been a source of protection for the homeworld, suddenly became a weapon turned against the defenders. Invisible forces reached out from the platforms and grabbed the Zephyrian ships like giant hands made of pure physics. A massive Zephyrian battle cruiser, over 2 kilometers long and armed with enough weapons to destroy a moon, was suddenly pulled toward the planet by a gravitational field 100 times stronger than normal. The ship's engines screamed as they tried to fight against the impossible force, but it was useless. The great warship was crushed like an empty can as the artificial gravity field compressed it into a ball of twisted metal. Other Zephyrian vessels found themselves flung away from the planet with such force that their hulls cracked under the stress. Ships that had been designed to withstand direct hits from nuclear weapons were torn apart by gravitational forces that pulled their front and back sections in different directions. Commander Lee watched from his bridge as Zephyrian vessels that were larger than human space stations simply crumpled like paper in the grip of invisible fists. The enemy's careful defensive formations collapsed as ships were pulled out of position or smashed into each other by forces they could not understand or fight against. "Sir," reported his tactical officer, "the enemy flagship is trying to signal surrender." "Too late for that," Commander Lee replied coldly. "They should have thought about surrender before they murdered 50,000 civilians." The Battle of Zephyr Prime was not really a battle at all. It was a demonstration of what happened when a species that had mastered the fundamental forces of the universe decided to stop hiding its true capabilities. The Zephyrian fleet, which had seemed so powerful just minutes before, was systematically destroyed by weapons that turned physics itself into an instrument of war. In the command center of the Zephyrian homeworld, General Vorthak watched his entire fleet being torn apart by forces he could not comprehend. Ships that had protected his world for generations were being crushed, twisted, and flung into space like toys in the hands of an angry child. "What are they?" he whispered, staring at the tactical display that showed his proud fleet being reduced to floating debris. "What kind of beings can do this?" His aide, a young officer whose carapace was pale with fear, could only stare at the screens in horror. "Sir, I think we have made a terrible mistake. We did not attack merchants and traders. We attacked something much worse." As the last of the Zephyrian defensive fleet was destroyed, Admiral Kim opened a communication channel to the planet below. His voice carried the weight of absolute victory as he spoke to the species that had dared to attack human civilians. "People of Zephyr Prime," he said, "your military power is broken. Your fleets are destroyed. You have learned what happens when you mistake our mercy for weakness. We are not the peaceful traders you thought we were. We are dragons, and you have awakened our wrath." The war ended as quickly as it had begun, but not in the way most galactic conflicts concluded. There were no peace negotiations, no treaties signed by exhausted diplomats, no compromise agreements that left both sides partially satisfied. Instead, the Zephyrian hegemony simply ceased to exist as a military power. Admiral Jihu Kim's forces moved through Zephyrian space like a careful surgeon removing a cancer. Every military shipyard was destroyed or captured. Every weapons factory was shut down permanently. Every warship that had survived the earlier battles was either destroyed or taken as war prizes. But the human forces showed remarkable restraint in their victory. Civilian populations were protected and treated well. Hospitals continued to operate. Food distribution centers remained open. Schools kept teaching children. The humans made it clear that their war was with the Zephyrian military, not with ordinary people who had never chosen to attack human colonies. Commander Minho Lee oversaw the occupation of 3 former military worlds, ensuring that families had enough food and medical supplies while preventing any attempt to rebuild weapons factories. His soldiers were strict but fair, helping to distribute aid while making sure no one tried to hide military equipment. "The civilians are not our enemies," he told his officers during a briefing. "They are victims of their own government's bad decisions. We treat them with respect, but we remain watchful for any signs of military activity." Within weeks of the war's end, Admiral Sora Park found herself standing before the Galactic Council in the Great Chamber on Centauri Station. Representatives from dozens of species sat in stunned silence as she prepared to explain humanity's new position in galactic affairs. The chamber had never been so quiet during such an important meeting. "Honored delegates," Admiral Park began, her voice carrying clearly through the vast room. "For 3 centuries, humanity has played the role of peaceful merchants and careful diplomats. We have solved problems through trade agreements and patient negotiation. We have been the species that other civilizations could trust to be reasonable and gentle." She paused, looking around the chamber at faces that showed fear, confusion, and newfound respect. You may have wondered why we chose this path. Today, I will tell you the truth. We have been peaceful because we are capable of total war. We have been merchants because we are capable of being conquerors. We chose restraint because we understood the alternative. The silence in the chamber was so complete that the soft hum of the life support system seemed loud. Species that had known humans for generations were finally learning the truth about their peaceful trading partners. What you witnessed in the war against the Zephyrians was not humanity learning to fight, Admiral Park continued. It was humanity revealing what we have always been capable of. We are not traders who learned military tactics. We are warriors who chose to become merchants. We are not diplomats who discovered weapons of war. We are dragons who chose to sleep. In the audience, the Altarian ambassador shifted nervously in his seat. His species had been considering a territorial dispute with humanity over mining rights in the Vega system. That dispute suddenly seemed much less important than it had a few days ago. The choice remains yours, Admiral Park said, her voice growing firm. We prefer to return to our role as peaceful traders and diplomats. We want to continue building relationships through mutual benefit and shared prosperity. But if you threaten our people, if you attack our colonies, if you mistake our preference for peace as weakness, then you will not face our military. You will awaken the dragons. Captain Hannah Song, now promoted to Admiral of the Third Fleet, spent the following months overseeing the transformation of former Zephyrian military worlds. The work was surprisingly gentle for a military occupation. Human forces focused on ensuring that money and resources reached the families of the 50,000 civilians who had died in the attacks on human colonies. Former Zephyrian weapons factories were converted into civilian manufacturing plants that produced medical equipment and agricultural tools. Military academies became regular schools that taught children about science and mathematics instead of warfare. Orbital defense platforms were dismantled and their materials used to build space stations for trade and research. The goal is not revenge, Admiral Song explained to her staff. The goal is to make sure this never happens again. We rebuild their society without the military power that made them think they could attack peaceful neighbors. Within 6 months, something remarkable happened. The massive human fleets that had dominated the headlines of every galactic news service simply faded away. The dragon fleets returned to their hidden bases scattered throughout human space. The terrible weapons that had torn apart Zephyrian battle groups were powered down and put back into storage. Admiral Jihu Kim watched from Terra Station as normal civilian traffic resumed throughout human space. Merchant vessels from dozens of species moved peacefully between human colonies, carrying goods and passengers just as they had before the war. Diplomatic shuttles transported ambassadors to trade negotiations and cultural exchanges. To most outside observers, it looked as if humanity had simply returned to being the peaceful merchants and diplomats they had always appeared to be. But now every species in the galaxy understood the truth that lay beneath that peaceful exterior. In his final log entry as commander of the First Dragon Fleet, Admiral Kim wrote words that would be studied by military historians for centuries. Today we have proven the most important lesson of warfare. The greatest strength is not in the ability to destroy, but in the wisdom to choose when destruction is necessary. We have shown that true power lies not in the weapons we can build, but in our decision about when to use them. He paused in his writing, looking out at the stars where human colonies continued their quiet expansion. The dragons sleep again, but they are not gone. They remain ready to wake if humanity is threatened. May the galaxy never forget the difference between choosing peace and being forced into it. The war was over, but its lessons would echo through galactic history forever.